Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold observatory window, watching the impossible sight unfold above Earth's atmosphere. Thousands of alien vessels hung in perfect formation, their dark hulls blotting out familiar constellations. The ships varied in size from sleek fighters no bigger than Earth's jets to massive dreadnoughts that stretched for kilometers. They had arrived 3 days ago without warning, materializing from hyperspace in coordinated waves that demonstrated military precision beyond anything humanity had ever achieved. "How many are we looking at now?" asked Commander James Rodriguez, his weathered hands gripping the railing beside her. The old soldier's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many battles. But nothing had prepared him for this. Sarah consulted her tablet, its screen flickering with constantly updating data streams from observatories worldwide. The latest count puts it at 12,000 confirmed vessels. But they keep arriving. Every 6 hours another wave appears. She paused, studying the formations. They're not random either. Look at this pattern. She projected a holographic display showing the alien fleet's positioning. The ships formed concentric rings around Earth, each ring rotating at different speeds and altitudes. The innermost ring contained the largest vessels, their weapons clearly visible as massive energy cannons that could probably crack continents. The outer rings consisted of smaller ships that moved in complex patterns like sharks circling prey. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way," Sarah murmured. "The mathematical precision is incredible. They've positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that cover every possible escape route. No ship could leave Earth's atmosphere without passing through multiple kill zones." Down on Earth's surface, panic had initially gripped every major city. Stock markets crashed. Governments convened emergency sessions and millions of people fled urban areas in chaotic mass evacuations. But after 3 days of the aliens simply watching, an eerie calm had settled over the planet. The invaders made no demands, issued no communications, and showed no signs of immediate aggression. They just waited. Sarah had been working around the clock with an international team of scientists, desperately trying to understand their visitors' technology and intentions. The alien ships defied conventional physics in ways that made her head spin. They generated no visible propulsion, yet moved with impossible grace through space. Their energy signature suggested power sources that could fuel entire civilizations. Most disturbing of all, every attempt at communication had been met with complete silence. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this," called Dr. Yuki Tanaka from across the observatory. The young quantum physicist's voice carried an edge of excitement mixed with fear. She was hunched over a complex array of monitoring equipment that had been hastily assembled to study the alien formations. Sarah hurried over, Rodriguez close behind. Tanaka's screens displayed wave patterns that looked like nothing Sarah had ever seen.
"What am I looking at?"
"I've been monitoring quantum fluctuations around the alien fleet," Tanaka explained, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "At first I thought the readings were equipment malfunctions, but I've triple-checked everything. They're generating some kind of quantum field that extends far beyond their physical positions." The display showed Earth surrounded by a translucent bubble of energy that pulsed with alien technology. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she realized the implications. They're not just blocking our escape routes. They've created a quantum barrier around the entire planet. Rodriguez leaned closer, studying the data with a soldier's eye for tactical situations. "What does that mean for us?" Sarah ran calculations in her head, cross-referencing with known physics principles. "If this field operates the way I think it does, they've essentially turned Earth into a closed system. Nothing gets in or out without their permission. Our satellites are probably only working because they're allowing it. Our communications, our power grids, everything electronic could be shut down instantly if they choose." The observatory fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the distant sound of jets conducting futile patrol flights. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing the end of human independence, possibly the end of human civilization as they knew it. But Sarah noticed something else in the data that made her frown. There were inconsistencies in the quantum field, tiny fluctuations that didn't match the aliens' otherwise perfect precision. She pulled up additional sensor data from observatories in different time zones, comparing readings from the past 72 hours. "Tanaka, look at this," she said, highlighting specific data points. "The field strength varies in regular patterns. It's almost like they're scanning us, but not just with sensors. They're probing our quantum signature, learning how our matter is structured at the subatomic level. Rodriguez's expression darkened. Reconnaissance before an attack? Maybe, Sarah replied, but something nagged at her about that interpretation. Or maybe they're looking for something specific. The scans are too detailed, too thorough for simple military intelligence. They're studying us like specimens. Outside the observatory, the alien fleet continued its silent vigil. Earth's major cities remained lit up like normal, creating a surreal contrast with the apocalyptic situation overhead. Most people had returned to their homes after the initial panic, though few were sleeping well. The global internet buzzed with theories, prayers, and desperate attempts to find meaning in humanity's apparent final chapter. Sarah pulled up communication logs from government facilities worldwide. Every major power had attempted contact using radio waves, laser communications, even primitive nuclear pulse patterns. The aliens acknowledged nothing. They simply maintained their positions and continued their mysterious scanning operations. "There's something else," Tanaka said quietly, pointing to a new reading on her displays. "The quantum signatures they're detecting aren't just from Earth's general matter. They're specifically scanning areas with high human population density, cities, towns, anywhere we've gathered in large numbers." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They're mapping us. Not just our technology or our planet's resources. They're cataloging humanity itself. As if responding to her words, the alien fleet began a subtle shift in formation. The massive dreadnoughts in the inner ring slowly rotated to present their weapon arrays toward Earth's major population centers. No shots were fired, but the message was unmistakable. Humanity was completely at their mercy. The observatory's communication system crackled to life with an emergency broadcast from the United Nations headquarters. "All scientific facilities, this is UN Command. We need immediate analysis of any new alien activity. Reports are coming in worldwide of formation changes." Sarah looked at her colleagues, seeing her own mixture of fascination and terror reflected in their faces. They were scientists who had spent their lives seeking answers about the universe. Now they might be witnessing humanity's final exam, administered by intelligences so advanced that Earth's entire civilization was nothing more than an interesting data point to be studied before disposal. The message arrived exactly 96 hours after the aliens' first appearance, transmitted simultaneously to every electronic device on Earth, not just government facilities or military installations, but every smartphone, television, radio, and computer screen on the planet displayed the same text in each user's native language. Sarah stared at her tablet as the words appeared in crisp, clinical English. "Human specimens have been catalogued. Compliance testing will commence. Resistance will result in immediate termination of local populations. Cooperation will result in extended survival periods for selected breeding groups." Around the observatory, her colleagues stood frozen, reading identical messages in Japanese, Spanish, Arabic, and dozens of other languages. The aliens had somehow bypassed every security protocol, every firewall, every encryption system humanity had ever devised. They had demonstrated that Earth's entire technological infrastructure was nothing more than a plaything to them. Commander Rodriguez was the first to break the stunned silence. "Specimens, breeding groups." His voice carried the barely controlled fury of a soldier who had finally met an enemy he couldn't fight. "They're talking about us like we're livestock." Dr. Tanaka's hands shook as she pulled up new sensor readings. The quantum field surrounding Earth had intensified, creating patterns that made her equipment scream with overloaded data streams. "The scans are increasing in frequency and intensity. Whatever compliance testing means, I think it's starting now." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The aliens had spent 4 days studying humanity like researchers examining insects. Now they were moving to the next phase of their investigation. But what did compliance testing involve? And why were they bothering with tests at all instead of simply taking what they wanted? The answer came from the worst possible source. News feeds across the globe began reporting simultaneous incidents in major cities worldwide. In New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other population centers, people were simply disappearing. Not in dramatic abductions with bright lights and flying saucers, but in silent, clinical removals that left no trace except empty spaces where human beings had been standing moments before. Sarah watched security camera footage from Times Square that showed thousands of people going about their daily business when suddenly, random individuals simply vanished. 1 second they were walking down the street or sitting on benches. The next second there was nothing but empty air. No flash of light, no sound, no disturbance of any kind. The people around the disappeared didn't even seem to notice immediately, as if their minds were struggling to process what they had witnessed. Teleportation technology, Rodriguez muttered, studying the footage with tactical precision. They're sampling populations from urban centers. Look at the pattern. He was right. The disappearances weren't random. The aliens were taking specific demographic samples. Men and women of various ages, different ethnic backgrounds, people representing different professions and social classes. It was a systematic collection designed to create a comprehensive cross-section of human society. Sarah felt sick as she realized what she was witnessing. They're building a human zoo, taking breeding pairs from different populations to preserve genetic diversity. But then something unexpected happened that changed everything. In a small town in rural Montana called Millbrook, population barely 3,000, the compliance testing went wrong. Sarah first noticed the anomaly in Tanaka's quantum readings. Where other cities showed the smooth, controlled energy signatures of alien teleportation technology, Millbrook displayed chaotic spikes and fluctuations that suggested something had gone seriously awry with the aliens. She pulled up news feeds from the area and found amateur video footage shot by a local farmer named Bill Henderson. The shaky smartphone video showed alien ships descending toward Millbrook, just like they had in other cities worldwide. But as the ships approached the town's main street, something extraordinary happened. The lead alien vessel, a sleek craft about the size of a city bus, suddenly stopped in midair and began shaking violently. Energy discharges arced across its hull, and the ship's smooth flight became erratic, wobbling like a damaged aircraft. The other alien ships in the formation backed away from their malfunctioning lead craft, creating a safe distance that suggested even they weren't sure what was happening. Then the damaged ship crashed. It wasn't a controlled landing or a graceful descent. The alien craft plummeted from the sky like a stone, smashing through the roof of Millbrook's only diner and exploding in a shower of sparks and strange blue flames that burned without smoke. Sarah rewound the footage, studying every frame with scientific precision. This is impossible. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. What could cause a malfunction like that? Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder, his military experience offering a different perspective. Maybe it wasn't a malfunction. Look at the timing. The ship was working perfectly until it got close to the town itself. Sarah pulled up geographical data for Millbrook, cross-referencing with geological surveys and electromagnetic readings. What she found made her heart race with excitement. Tanaka, look at this. Millbrook sits directly over one of the largest natural quartz crystal formations in North America. The entire area is rich in piezoelectric minerals. Piezoelectric? Rodriguez asked. Crystals that generate electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress, Sarah explained, her mind racing through the implications. But more importantly, they can interfere with quantum fields under specific conditions. If the aliens' technology relies on quantum manipulation for everything from propulsion to teleportation, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood. Humanity had accidentally discovered the aliens' one weakness, and it was hiding in Earth's own geology. The crashed alien ship in Millbrook was still burning with those strange blue flames when something even more remarkable happened. Local residents, instead of fleeing in terror, began approaching the wreckage. The town's volunteer fire department arrived not to put out the fire, but to set up a perimeter and protect their neighbors from potential dangers. But most importantly, the alien ship's crash had broken something in their quantum barrier. For the first time in 4 days, a signal got through the aliens' blockade. It was a simple radio transmission from Millbrook's emergency services, but it reached a military listening post in Colorado before the aliens could stop it. The message was brief but electrifying. Alien ship down. Crew inside appears to be in distress, requesting instructions on whether to provide humanitarian aid. Sarah stared at the transmission logs, hardly believing what she was reading. Faced with their first opportunity to actually interact with their would-be conquerors, the people of Millbrook were asking if they should help the aliens who had just tried to abduct them. It was the most human response imaginable, and it might just save the world. The alien fleet's reaction was immediate and telling. Ships throughout the formation began pulling back from Earth's surface, increasing altitude as if something about the planet itself had become dangerous to them. The smooth, coordinated movements that had characterized their deployment became hesitant and cautious. For the first time since their arrival, the aliens looked uncertain. And uncertainty, Sarah realized, was something humanity could work with. The alien in the crashed ship was dying, and Dr. Sarah Chen found herself racing across 3 states to try to save it. The call had come directly from the president's science advisor at 4 in the morning. Within 6 hours, Sarah was aboard a military transport heading for Montana, carrying equipment she had never imagined would be used for xenobiology. The world's leading experts in quantum physics, medicine, and linguistics were converging on Millbrook, a town that had gone from complete obscurity to the center of human history in less than 24 hours. As their helicopter approached the crash site, Sarah pressed her face to the window and gasped. The alien ship had embedded itself so deeply in the diner that it looked like a strange metal growth emerging from the building's ruins. The blue flames had died out, but the hull still glowed with an eerie phosphorescence that hurt to look at directly. More importantly, the quantum interference field that had brought the ship down was still active. Her instruments showed massive distortions in local spacetime that made the area around Millbrook effectively invisible to the alien fleet. Overhead, it's like a natural cloaking device, she murmured to Dr. Martinez, the team's xenobiologist. The aliens can't scan through the interference, which means they can't target this location for teleportation or energy weapons. Dr. Martinez nodded grimly, which also means they can't retrieve their crew member. If there's still a crew member alive in there. The team landed in Millbrook's high school football field, which had been converted into a makeshift command center by the National Guard. But what struck Sarah most was the attitude of the local residents. Instead of cowering in their homes or fleeing the area, they had organized themselves into support groups. The local doctor, an elderly man named Peterson, had actually entered the crashed ship and was providing what medical aid he could to the alien inside. "You have to understand," explained Sheriff Janet Morrison, a tough woman in her 50s who seemed completely unfazed by the situation. "This is farm country. When something's hurt, you help it. Doesn't matter if it's a cow, a horse, or whatever that thing is in there." Sarah suited up in protective gear and followed Dr. Peterson into the wreckage. The interior of the alien ship was like nothing she had ever imagined. Instead of mechanical controls and computer screens, the walls themselves seemed to be alive, pulsing with organic rhythms and responding to touch with waves of colored light. The technology was so advanced it resembled magic more than science. At the center of the ship's main chamber, they found the alien. It was humanoid but clearly not human, standing about 7 feet tall with elongated limbs and skin that shifted between silver and deep blue depending on the angle of light. Its large black eyes were closed, and shallow breathing suggested it was unconscious but alive. Most striking was the way it seemed to be connected to the ship itself, through fiber optic tendrils that emerged from ports along its spine and arms. "Symbiotic technology," Sarah breathed. "The ship isn't just a vehicle. It's an extension of the pilot's nervous system." Dr. Peterson, who had been monitoring the alien's vital signs with jury-rigged medical equipment, looked up with concern. "The symbiotic connection is failing. As the ship's systems shut down from the quantum interference, it's affecting the pilot's biological functions. If we can't restore the connection or safely disconnect it, this individual will die within hours." Sarah found herself faced with an impossible decision: save the alien's life and potentially lose humanity's only advantage, or let it die and maintain the strategic upper hand that Millbrook's unique geology provided. But as she looked at the unconscious being lying helpless before her, there was really no choice at all. "We help," she said firmly. "Dr. Martinez, start analyzing the biological interface. I'll work on understanding the ship's quantum systems. If we can create a stable bridge between the alien's nervous system and the ship while protecting both from the interference field, we might be able to save a life and learn something crucial about their technology." The work was painstaking and dangerous. Every adjustment to the ship's system sent feedback through the quantum field that made Sarah's instruments scream warnings about cascade failures and dimensional fractures. But slowly, working with Dr. Peterson's medical expertise and the practical problem-solving skills of Millbrook's residents, they began to make progress. It was Bill Henderson, the farmer who had first filmed the crash, who provided the breakthrough insight. "You know," he said, watching Sarah struggle with quantum field equations, "this reminds me of the time our prize bull got tangled in an electric fence. You can't just yank him free or you'll kill him. You have to slowly reduce the current while giving him something else to ground himself on. The analogy was crude but brilliant. Instead of trying to fight the quantum interference, they could use it. Sarah began modifying the ship's systems to gradually transition the aliens' symbiotic connection from the failing ship to a new quantum matrix they built using components from her own equipment and surprisingly sophisticated electronics, salvaged from the town's agricultural monitoring systems. As they worked, something extraordinary happened. The alien began to regain consciousness, and its large black eyes fixed on Sarah with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and grateful. When she carefully adjusted one of the neural interfaces to reduce what appeared to be pain signals, the alien's mouth moved in what could only be described as a smile. "It knows we're trying to help," Dr. Peterson said wonderingly. "Look at the biorhythm patterns. Stress hormones are decreasing. Heart rate is stabilizing. It trusts us." But the most remarkable moment came when the alien, still too weak to speak but clearly conscious, slowly reached out with one elongated hand and touched Sarah's protective glove. The contact sent a wave of sensation through her mind that wasn't telepathy exactly, but something deeper. For just an instant, she felt what the alien felt: confusion, fear, gratitude, and something else that took her a moment to identify: loneliness, profound, aching loneliness. The alien wasn't part of a conquering army. It was as much a prisoner of this situation as humanity was. Dr. Martinez, who had been analyzing tissue samples, looked up with excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this. The alien's DNA structure shares fundamental similarities with Earth life, but there are artificial modifications throughout the genome, systematic enhancements that look like they were imposed rather than evolved." Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Modified, enhanced like breeding stock that's been optimized for specific traits. The alien's eyes widened at her words, and it attempted to speak. The sounds that emerged were like music mixed with mathematics. Beautiful but incomprehensible. However, the emotional content was unmistakable. The alien was trying to warn them about something. Outside the crashed ship, the quantum interference field continued to hide Millbrook from the alien fleet. But Sarah realized that their brief window of opportunity was about to close. The other aliens would eventually find a way to penetrate the interference, or they would simply destroy the entire area to eliminate the anomaly. Humanity needed to act fast, and they needed to understand what this lone alien was trying to tell them, because Sarah was beginning to suspect that the fleet surrounding Earth wasn't an invasion force at all. It was something much worse. A harvest operation controlled by an intelligence that viewed both humans and these aliens as nothing more than resources to be collected and processed. The alien struggled to sit up, its symbiotic connections finally stabilizing, thanks to their improvised quantum bridge. With great effort, it pointed toward the ceiling and spoke a single word that somehow translated itself directly into Sarah's mind. Shepherds. The meaning hit her like a physical blow. The fleet wasn't here to conquer Earth. They were here to collect a harvest that had been growing for thousands of years, managed by shepherds who had been guiding human development from the shadows, and now finally the crops were ready to be gathered. The alien's name was Zeth, and the story it told through a combination of translated speech and shared mental images shattered everything. Humanity thought it knew about Earth's place in the universe. Sarah sat in the improvised medical bay that Millbrook's residents had constructed in their high school gymnasium, watching Zeth slowly recover, while learning the terrible truth about humanity's past and future. The quantum interference field still protected the town, but satellite feeds showed the alien fleet above beginning to shift into new formations that suggested they were preparing for more aggressive action. The shepherds arrived on your world approximately 12,000 years ago, Zeth explained, its voice now coming through a translation device Sarah's team had built, using a combination of Earth electronics and salvaged alien technology. They found a promising species that had recently developed agriculture and permanent settlements. Humans showed the three key traits the shepherds prize: adaptability, creativity, and the capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Sarah felt sick as the implications became clear. They've been managing us, like farmers managing livestock. Zeth's large eyes showed what she had learned to recognize as sadness. My people discovered this truth too late. We are from a world called Kepler 442b in your astronomical designations. The shepherds arrived on our world 800 years ago, after we had developed what you would call industrial civilization. We thought we were making first contact with benevolent explorers. The mental images Zeth shared showed a world not unlike Earth, with sprawling cities and advanced technology, but inhabited by beings like itself with elongated limbs and skin that shifted color with emotion. The shepherds had arrived with gifts of knowledge and technology, offering to help Kepler 442b's civilization reach new heights of achievement. They enhanced our genetics, improved our technology, eliminated diseases, and extended our lifespans, Zeth continued. For 2 centuries, we lived in what we thought was a golden age. Our population grew, our knowledge expanded, and we believed we were partners in a great galactic civilization. Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Martinez and Commander Rodriguez, who were monitoring communications from world governments. Every major power on Earth was demanding answers about the situation in Millbrook, but the quantum interference made detailed communication impossible. They were operating in a bubble of protection that could collapse at any moment. "What happened?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Zeth's skin darkened to a deep blue that indicated profound grief. "The harvest came, just as it's coming for your world now. We learned that everything the shepherds had given us was designed to optimize us for their purposes. The genetic enhancements weren't gifts. They were modifications to make us more valuable as a resource. The technology they shared was designed to make us dependent on systems only they could control." The mental images shifted to show scenes of chaos and desperation. Ships identical to those now surrounding Earth had appeared over Kepler 442b's cities. The planet's population had been systematically collected, with the best specimens taken for breeding programs and the rest processed for biological resources that could be used to enhance other species throughout the Shepherd's empire. "But some of us escaped?" Sarah asked, looking at Zeth with new understanding. "A few. Those of us who could be useful as overseers and technicians for future harvest operations. We were given enhanced ship integration capabilities and assigned to harvest fleets throughout the galaxy. I have been part of 17 different harvest operations over the past 600 years. Sarah felt her anger building as she realized the full scope of the Shepherd's operation. "Your slaves? You and everyone in those ships up there?" Zeth nodded sadly. "Slaves who have been modified to enjoy our servitude, to feel fulfilled when we efficiently process other species for our masters. The ship integration technology releases neurochemicals that create addiction to the symbiotic connection. Most of my people no longer remember that we once had independent thoughts. But something had gone wrong with Zeth's modifications, she learned. The crash and forced disconnection from the ship had disrupted the neurochemical control system, allowing its original personality to resurface for the first time in centuries. It was experiencing something like withdrawal from the ship integration addiction, which explained the physical distress Dr. Peterson had been treating. The shepherds themselves never appeared during harvest operations, Zeth explained. They remain in heavily shielded command vessels at the edge of star systems, directing operations through quantum-linked slave crews. The ships you see above your world are crewed entirely by modified beings from dozens of different species, all believing they are fulfilling their highest purpose by serving the harvest. Sarah's scientific mind raced through the implications. The quantum interference field here in Millbrook. It's not just blocking their sensors and weapons. It's disrupting the neurochemical control systems that keep the slave crews compliant. Zeth's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. If that's true, then any of my people who come into contact with this field might remember who they truly are. Commander Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening while monitoring military communications, suddenly looked up with urgency. "Dr. Chen, we've got problems." Satellite feeds show the alien fleet beginning to descend toward Earth's surface. They're not maintaining their previous standoff distance anymore. Sarah pulled up the feeds on her tablet and felt her blood run cold. The massive dreadnoughts that had remained in high orbit were now moving into Earth's atmosphere. Their weapons arrays powering up with energy signatures that could be detected even through conventional sensors. More ominously, the ships were positioning themselves over areas with the highest human population densities. "They're getting impatient," Zeth said with obvious distress.
Standard harvest protocol requires collection of specimens within 72 hours of initial compliance testing.
If local populations show signs of resistance or if complications arise, the shepherds authorize immediate escalation to forced collection methods. Forced collection? Dr. Martinez asked. Zeth's skin shifted to a sickly yellow color. Mass paralysis weapons deployed from orbit, followed by industrial-scale collection systems. Instead of selective sampling, they take entire population centers and sort the specimens later. Sarah stared at the satellite feeds, showing alien dreadnoughts positioning themselves over New York, London, Beijing, and dozens of other major cities. In less than an hour, billions of human beings would be paralyzed by alien weapons and collected like insects by machines designed for maximum efficiency rather than minimum suffering. There has to be something we can do, she said desperately. Some way to use what we've learned here. Zeth struggled to sit up more fully, its recovery accelerating now that it was free from the ship integration addiction. The quantum interference field here is localized, but the principle could be scaled up. If you could generate similar interference on a global scale, it would disrupt not just the harvest operation, but the neurochemical control systems of every slave crew in the fleet. Sarah felt a spark of desperate hope. Free them from their conditioning. Turn the alien fleet against the shepherds. But the power requirements would be enormous, Dr. Martinez pointed out. We're talking about generating quantum field distortions across an entire planet. No technology on Earth could possibly. She stopped mid-sentence as Sarah's expression changed. The pieces of a desperate plan were falling into place in her mind, based on principles that were theoretically sound but practically insane. Not Earth technology, Sarah said quietly. Alien technology. The ship right here in Millbrook. If we could modify its quantum systems to work in reverse, to amplify and broadcast the interference field instead of trying to shield against it. Zeth's skin brightened to a hopeful silver. The symbiotic control systems on the ship are designed to interface with neural networks across vast distances. If those systems could be reprogrammed to generate interference instead of control signals. Sarah was already moving toward the crashed ship, her mind racing through calculations and possibilities. It was a plan born of desperation and held together by theoretical physics that might not even work. But it was the only chance humanity had. She paused at the ship's entrance and looked back at Zeth. Will you help us, even though it means betraying everything you've been conditioned to believe for 600 years? Zeth's response came not in words but in actions. Despite its still weak condition, it rose from the medical bed and walked toward the ship that had been its prison for centuries, ready to help humanity turn it into an instrument of liberation. Sarah's hands trembled as she worked deep inside the alien ship's neural matrix, surrounded by pulsing organic cables that responded to her touch like living tissue. Every modification she made to the ship's systems brought them closer to either salvation or catastrophic failure, and she had no way of knowing which until she activated the final sequence. Zeth floated beside her in the ship's zero-gravity chamber, its elongated fingers dancing across control surfaces that existed somewhere between technology and biology. The alien's knowledge of the ship's systems was encyclopedic, but even it had never attempted anything like what they were planning. The neural broadcasting array is designed to transmit compliance commands to biological systems across a range of approximately 1 million kilometers, Zeth explained, its translated voice tight with concentration. By reversing the polarity of the quantum resonance chambers and linking them to the local interference field, we should be able to broadcast liberation instead of enslavement. Should be able to. Sarah tried not to think about all the ways their desperate plan could go wrong. They were essentially performing brain surgery on technology they barely understood, hoping to cure 600 years of conditioning in thousands of alien minds simultaneously. Outside the ship, Millbrook's residents had transformed their quiet farming community into humanity's last hope. Sheriff Morrison coordinated evacuation plans for when the quantum interference field inevitably collapsed. Dr. Peterson monitored communications from the outside world, relaying increasingly desperate updates about the alien fleet's positioning, and Bill Henderson, the farmer whose simple observation had sparked their breakthrough, now served as their lookout, watching the skies for signs that their window of opportunity was closing. Dr. Chen, Dr. Peterson's voice crackled through the communication system they had rigged between the ship and the town's emergency center. Military satellites are showing energy buildups in the alien weapon systems. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen in the next 30 minutes. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at the tangled mass of quantum circuits she had been rewiring for the past 8 hours. Every connection had to be perfect, every resonance frequency precisely calibrated, or the entire system would either fail to function or tear itself apart in a cascade of dimensional fractures. Zeth, are you certain the slave crews will remember their original personalities once the conditioning breaks? She asked. Because if this doesn't work, we're not just failing to save humanity. We're condemning every enslaved species in that fleet to continue serving the shepherds forever. Zeth's skin shifted through a complex pattern of colors Sarah had learned indicated deep thought mixed with painful memories. Memory suppression through neurochemical manipulation leaves the original personality intact, but inaccessible. When the suppression is removed suddenly, there is often a period of confusion and disorientation, but the core identity reasserts itself. I know this because it happened to me when your interference field disrupted my ship integration systems. Sarah nodded and made the final connection, a delicate fusion of alien neural technology with a modified quantum field generator she had, built using components from her own equipment and, surprisingly, sophisticated electronics from Millbrook's agricultural monitoring systems. The hybrid device hummed with power that made her teeth ache and created visual distortions in the air around it. Broadcasting array is connected to the interference amplifier, she announced. Zeth, are you ready to interface with the system? The alien moved to the ship's central command position, where dozens of neural interface cables waited to reconnect it to the vessel's consciousness. But instead of the addictive control system it had known for centuries, these cables would now channel the liberation signal they had created together. Dr. Chen, Zeth said quietly, you should know that interfacing with this modified system will likely be fatal for me. The quantum resonance required to broadcast across the entire fleet will exceed my nervous system's ability to process the feedback. Sarah stopped working and stared at the alien who had become not just an ally but something approaching a friend over the past day. There has to be another way. We can build automated systems, There is no time, Zeth interrupted gently, and automated systems lack the nuanced understanding necessary to overcome 6 centuries of conditioning. This signal must carry not just quantum interference but the emotional weight of remembered freedom. Only a conscious mind that has experienced both slavery and liberation can transmit that. Outside the ship, Sarah could hear the distinctive whine of jet engines as military aircraft conducted desperate reconnaissance flights, trying to determine if the alien fleet was preparing to attack. Every government on Earth was demanding to know what was happening in Millbrook, but the quantum interference made detailed communication impossible. They were operating in complete isolation, making decisions that would affect the fate of multiple civilizations. Sarah made her choice. Then we do it together. If the system can handle 2 neural interfaces simultaneously, we link both our minds to the broadcast. Share the load. Zeth's large eyes widened in what she recognized as surprise mixed with gratitude. Dr. Chen, you are human. Your nervous system is not compatible with our technology. The interface could kill you or cause permanent neurological damage. Maybe, Sarah agreed, already reaching for the spare neural cables. But I'm also a scientist who spent her entire career studying quantum physics. If anyone can survive a direct interface with quantum broadcasting technology, it's probably me. And besides, she added with a smile that felt braver than she actually felt, I want to be connected to this system when we send our message to the fleet. I want every enslaved being up there to understand that freedom is possible. She connected the neural interface cables to contact points behind her ears, using medical tape and determination in place of the biological ports that Zeth possessed naturally. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced, like having her thought suddenly expanded to fill a space the size of a star system, while simultaneously feeling every quantum fluctuation in the local space-time as a physical sensation. Are you ready? Zeth asked, its own neural connections beginning to glow with energy that pulsed in rhythm with both their heartbeats. Sarah looked at the readouts showing energy signatures from the alien fleet above. Weapon systems were powering up across thousands of ships. In minutes, maybe seconds, the mass paralysis weapons would activate, and humanity's chance for freedom would end forever. Do it, she said. The signal that erupted from Millbrook's quantum interference field was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic civilizations. It wasn't just electromagnetic radiation or quantum resonance. It was consciousness itself, broadcast at the speed of thought across space-time directly into the neural networks of every enslaved being in the Harvest fleet. Sarah felt her awareness explode outward, touching minds that had been locked in artificial contentment for centuries. She experienced 600 years of Zeth's memories in seconds, but also reached out to touch the suppressed personalities of thousands of other enslaved beings. Ship crews who had once been farmers, artists, scientists, and teachers on 100 different worlds, all reduced to biological components in the shepherd's vast harvesting machine. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the entire fleet, enslaved crew members suddenly remembered who they had been before the conditioning. The realization hit them like a tsunami of recovered identity, washing away centuries of artificial purpose and revealing the horrible truth of what they had become. Sarah felt their rage, their grief, and their desperate hunger for revenge against the shepherds who had stolen their lives. But most importantly, she felt their hope, the same hope that had driven humanity to reach for the stars, to explore the unknown, and to help a dying alien despite every logical reason to let it perish. The quantum broadcast carried all of this across space in an instant, imprinting the emotional signature of liberation directly onto the neural networks of the Harvest fleet. And then, as Sarah's human nervous system reached the absolute limit of what it could endure, the signal found something else. At the edge of the star system, hidden behind gravitational shields and quantum cloaking fields, the Shepherd's command vessel detected the impossible, a signal that should not exist, carrying a message that threatened the foundation of their galactic empire. For the first time in millennia, the Shepherds themselves felt something they had long forgotten: fear. The silence that followed the quantum broadcast was more terrifying than any sound Sarah had ever heard. She floated in the ship's neural chamber, her consciousness slowly pulling back from the vast network of liberated minds across the fleet above Earth. The neural interface cables behind her ears burned like brands, and she could taste copper in her mouth from where she had bitten her tongue during the massive feedback surge. But she was alive, and more importantly, she could feel that Zeth was alive too, though barely. "Did it work?" she asked weakly, her voice barely a whisper. Before Zeth could answer, the entire ship shuddered as something massive passed overhead. Through the viewing ports, Sarah could see one of the enormous alien dreadnoughts descending directly toward Millbrook, its weapons powered down and its hull displays showing what appeared to be surrender signals. Dr. Peterson's voice crackled through their communication system, filled with amazement and disbelief. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this. The alien ships, they're not attacking. They're landing. All of them. Across the entire planet." Sarah struggled to disconnect from the neural interface, her hands shaking from the aftereffects of quantum resonance exposure. Zeth helped her, its own movements careful and deliberate as it recovered from what should have been a fatal neural overload. The broadcast worked, Zeth confirmed, its skin now showing a pattern of colors Sarah had never seen before. What she realized was the natural pigmentation of its species, unmodified by Shepherd genetic manipulation. "I can feel it across the fleet network. My people are remembering who they were. All of our people from every harvested world." They made their way out of the ship and into Millbrook's main street, where an impossible scene was unfolding. The massive dreadnought had landed in the town's largest field, and alien beings were emerging from its hull. But instead of the coordinated military precision that had characterized their arrival, these beings moved with the hesitant uncertainty of people waking from a long dream. Sheriff Morrison approached Sarah with a mixture of relief and bewilderment on her face. "They're asking for asylum," she said, gesturing toward a group of tall, silver-skinned beings who stood near their landed ship. "They say they're refugees from something called the Shepherd Empire, and they want to surrender to human authorities." Sarah looked at the assembled aliens, beings who hours earlier had been preparing to harvest humanity like crops, now standing in a Montana farming community asking for protection. It was surreal, but the quantum resonance she had shared with them during the broadcast let her feel their genuine emotions: fear, hope, gratitude. and a desperate desire to atone for centuries of unwilling participation in the Shepherd's crimes. "Where are the Shepherds?" Sarah asked Zeth. Their command ship was at the edge of the system during the broadcast. Did the signal reach them too? Zeth's expression darkened. The Shepherds shield themselves from neural interference. They would have detected our broadcast but not been affected by it. However, they now know that their entire harvest fleet has been compromised, along with their centuries of genetic and social engineering on Earth. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's tablet began receiving a signal that bypassed every security protocol and encryption system on Earth. The message appeared simultaneously on every electronic device on the planet, just as the compliance testing announcement had days earlier. But this time, the communication carried a very different tone. Human specimens and corrupted harvest assets. The message read in precise, clinical language that somehow conveyed infinite arrogance and contempt. Your resistance to proper collection procedures has been noted and classified as a systemic contamination event. Sterilization protocols will commence in 24 hours. All biological material in this star system will be eliminated to prevent spread of the contamination to other harvest zones. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. They're going to destroy everything, not just Earth, but every liberated being in the fleet. Commander Rodriguez, who had been coordinating with world governments through the limited communication channels available, looked up from his secure phone with grim news. It's worse than that. Deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy signatures moving toward our solar system. Whatever's coming is significantly larger than the harvest fleet. Zeth's skin shifted to a deep purple that indicated profound fear. Extermination fleet. The Shepherds maintain them specifically for situations like this. Planet killers and solar disruption weapons designed to eliminate entire star systems when harvesting operations are compromised. Sarah stared at the liberated aliens scattered across Millbrook's fields and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her quantum broadcast had freed thousands of enslaved beings, but in doing so, she had condemned them all to death. The Shepherds would rather destroy Earth and everyone on it than allow their empire to be threatened by the idea of liberation. But then she noticed something that made her reconsider the situation. The liberated fleet wasn't just sitting helplessly in Earth's atmosphere. Ships were moving with purpose, regrouping into new formations that bore no resemblance to their previous harvest configurations. Energy readings from the vessels showed power systems being reconfigured and weapons arrays being modified. "What are they doing?" she asked Zeth. The alien's expression brightened with something that might have been fierce joy. "Preparing for war. Dr. Chen, you must understand. These ships represent the accumulated military technology of dozens of advanced civilizations. The Shepherds kept us enslaved, precisely because our combined forces would be capable of challenging their empire." Sarah felt a spark of desperate hope. "You're saying the liberated fleet could actually fight the extermination ships?" "More than fight them," Zeth replied. "We can win, but only if we coordinate our efforts properly, and only if we have something the Shepherds don't expect." "Which is?" Zeth looked directly at her with those large, intelligent eyes that now showed the full depth of its recovered personality. "Human strategic thinking. The Shepherds have spent millennia studying captured military tactics from conquered civilizations, but they've never faced an opponent who thinks the way humans do. Your species' combination of creativity, adaptability, and what you call crazy enough to work strategies could provide the tactical advantage we need." Sarah looked around at the scene in Millbrook, farmers and aliens working together to unload, medical supplies from landed ships, Sheriff Morrison organizing refugee assistance with the same calm efficiency she brought to county fair planning, Dr. Peterson providing medical care to beings whose biology he was learning about in real time. It was chaos, but it was functional chaos driven by the very human instinct to help others in need. "You want us to help plan a rebellion against a galactic empire?" she said slowly. "I want you to teach us how to be free," Zeth corrected. "My people have forgotten how to make independent decisions, how to think creatively, how to take risks for principles rather than just survival. But humans do these things naturally. You freed us with a plan that should have been impossible. Using resources you improvised from farming equipment and sheer determination." Sarah felt the magnitude of what was being proposed settle over her. humanity's first contact with alien. Intelligence wasn't going to result in peaceful knowledge sharing or gradual integration into galactic civilization. Instead, Earth was about to become the headquarters of an interstellar revolution against an empire that had been harvesting civilizations for millennia. "The extermination fleet will arrive in less than 24 hours, she said, her scientific mind already beginning to analyze the tactical possibilities. "If we're going to do this, we need to move fast." Zeth's skin brightened to the silver hue she had learned indicated determination. "Then let us begin. It's time to show the shepherds what happens when you try to harvest a species that refuses to be farmed." Sarah looked up at the sky, where thousands of liberated alien ships were taking positions for humanity's first space battle. In 18 hours, they would either achieve something that had never been accomplished in galactic history, or they would all die together in the attempt. Either way, it beat being collected like specimens. The final battle for Earth began exactly 18 hours and 37 minutes after Sarah's liberation broadcast, when the Shepherd extermination fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Sarah stood in the command center of the largest liberated dreadnought, surrounded by beings from 43 different worlds who had spent centuries as slaves and were now preparing to fight for freedom with a desperation that made their hands shake and their various alien biologies flood with adrenaline-equivalent chemicals. Through the ship's vast viewing ports, she could see the enemy approaching. 12 massive vessels that dwarfed even the Harvest fleet, their hulls black as space itself and bristling with weapons designed to crack planets like eggs. "Energy signatures are off the charts," reported Dr. Martinez, who had volunteered to join the command ship along with a team of Earth's best military strategists. Each of those ships carries enough firepower to glass an entire continent. Zeth, now serving as the liaison between human tactical thinking and the liberated fleet's technological capabilities, studied the approaching formation with the calm focus of someone who had nothing left to lose. Standard Shepherd doctrine calls for solar disruption first, followed by systematic planetary bombardment. They'll try to destabilize our sun to prevent any survivors from escaping to other star systems. Sarah felt her stomach clench at the casual way Zeth described the annihilation of everything she had ever known, but forced herself to focus on the tactical situation. Over the past 18 hours, she had learned more about space warfare than she had ever wanted to know, and the picture wasn't encouraging. The Shepherds had been perfecting their military technology for millennia, while the liberated fleet was essentially a group of escaped slaves trying to figure out how to use weapons they had been programmed never to turn against their masters. But humanity had contributed something the Shepherds couldn't have anticipated, the kind of strategic thinking that came from a species that had spent its entire history fighting for survival against impossible odds. "What about the quantum interference field?" Sarah asked, her mind racing through the possibilities they had discussed during their frantic planning session. "Could we scale it up even further?" Commander Rodriguez, who had been coordinating with military leaders worldwide, looked up from his communication array. "The network is in place. Every major city on Earth has teams standing by with modified electronics based on your Millbrook design. We can create a planetary-scale interference field, but it won't be stable for more than a few minutes before the power grid overloads." Sarah nodded. They had known from the beginning that this would be a desperate gambit with almost no chance of success, but sometimes the only choice was between a slim chance and no chance at all. "Initiate the field on my signal," she said, then turned to address the bridge crew. "All ships, this is Dr. Chen. Execute Pattern Omega." Pattern Omega was the most audacious military strategy Sarah had ever heard of, let alone helped devise. Instead of meeting the Shepherd fleet in traditional space combat, they were going to do something no military commander in galactic history had ever attempted. They were going to turn Earth itself into a weapon. The planetary quantum interference field activated simultaneously across every continent, powered by a combination of Earth's electrical grid, the liberated fleet's energy systems, and every nuclear power plant on the planet running at maximum output. The effect was immediately visible as waves of distortion rippled outward from Earth, creating an expanding bubble of quantum chaos that made space itself unreliable within its boundaries. The Shepherd extermination fleet, approaching at near light speed with their weapons charging for the opening solar bombardment, hit the interference field like a bullet hitting a spider web. Their ships didn't crash or explode, Instead, they began experiencing the same technological failures that had brought Zeth's ship down in Millbrook, but on a massive scale. "It's working," Dr. Martinez shouted as sensor readings showed the enemy formation beginning to break apart. "Their propulsion systems are failing. Navigation computers are offline, they're dead in space." But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The interference field was burning out Earth's power grid as she watched, and would collapse within minutes. The Shepherd's ships were disabled but not destroyed, and they would recover long before the field could be regenerated. This was their one chance to press their advantage. "All liberated fleet units, execute Phase 2, she commanded. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries, assuming there were any historians left to study it. The liberated fleet didn't attack the disabled Shepherd ships with conventional weapons. Instead, they did something that violated every principle of space warfare that had ever been developed. They boarded them. Thousands of small ships and shuttles, launched from the liberated dreadnoughts, carrying boarding parties made up of beings who had been enslaved by the Shepherds for generations. They weren't trying to capture the enemy vessels, they were trying to liberate them. Every Shepherd ship was crewed by enslaved beings from conquered worlds, just like the Harvest fleet had been. The boarding parties carried portable versions of Sarah's quantum interference generators, designed to break the neural conditioning that kept those crews in servitude. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of ship-to-ship combat, it was a struggle for the minds and souls of enslaved beings throughout the Shepherd fleet. Boarding parties fought their way through ship corridors not to plant explosives or capture command centers, but to reach neural control systems and broadcast liberation signals directly into the minds of enemy crew members. Sarah watched the tactical displays with a mixture of horror and hope as the battle played out across a dozen different ships simultaneously. The Shepherds themselves were fighting back, but they faced a fundamental disadvantage. They had built their entire military strategy around controlling enslaved crews, not defending against liberation attempts. "Shepherd command ship is responding," Zeth reported, its skin displaying patterns of concentration and determination. "They're attempting to broadcast override commands to regain control of their crews." Sarah felt the quantum interference field around Earth beginning to fluctuate as the power grid reached its absolute limits. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the field collapsed and the Shepherds regained their technological advantage. "Can we reach the command ship's neural broadcasting system?" she asked desperately. Zeth studied the tactical displays, calculating distances and defensive positions with the speed of someone whose nervous system had been optimized for centuries of space combat. Possible, but it would require a direct assault on the most heavily defended ship in their fleet. The boarding party would face almost certain death. Sarah looked around the command bridge at the faces of beings from dozens of different worlds, all of whom had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. These weren't soldiers. They were farmers, scientists, artists, and teachers who had been enslaved and forced to participate in the harvesting of other civilizations. But now they had a chance to strike back against their oppressors, and not one of them was backing down. "I'll lead the boarding party," she said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Zeth's skin shifted through a rapid sequence of colors that indicated shock, admiration, and profound concern. "Dr. Chen, you are human. Your biology is not optimized for space combat, and you lack the enhanced reflexes that would be necessary to survive an assault on a Shepherd command vessel." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the impossible things that had happened since a small town in Montana had accidentally shot down an alien ship. "Maybe that's exactly what we need. The Shepherds have been fighting enhanced beings for millennia. They know how to counter every possible tactical advantage except one, which is pure human stubbornness. The kind of crazy determination that makes a species develop agriculture just so they can stay in one place and fight each other more efficiently. The same instinct that made us help you even when logic said we should let you die." As Earth's quantum interference field flickered and began to collapse, Sarah Chen, a physicist from Colorado who had never fired a weapon in her life, prepared to lead an assault on the most dangerous military vessel in galactic history. The Shepherds had made one crucial mistake in their millennia of conquest. They had harvested humanity's technology, studied their biology, and cataloged their social structures. but they had never bothered to understand the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was the only logical outcome. The boarding shuttles launched toward the Shepard command ship, just as the interference field collapsed, carrying the hopes of every enslaved civilization in the galaxy toward what would either be the greatest liberation in galactic history or the most spectacular failure ever attempted. Either way, the Shepards were about to learn what it meant to try to harvest a species that had never learned how to quit.